Welcome to episode 16 of the Alcon Maddox War Plan webinar series. I'm Richard Ritchie, who many of you know already. For those of you who don't know me already, I actually run a recruitment and executive search firm based here in the UAE. We serve the UAE market and also Singapore. Actually a very niche organization that we just serve the IT channel industry. So that's spanning IT and services, computer software, computer and network security, and then also computer networking industries. And within that, the roles that we provide for companies are sales managers, directors of sales, VPs of sales, and then also channel and partnership management positions as well. Now, having spent the last 25 years building and leading high-performing sales teams, I know just how important it is to install the right commercial leader within organizations. That can not only have a direct impact on immediate value, it's also obviously very important when you're looking to break into new markets or open new channels. But I think in times like we're in today, what is actually proving quite beneficial to companies is having the right leader is a way of protecting the underlying revenue that you've worked so hard to achieve over the last few years. Now, over the last few months, we've actually helped a number of organizations install remote sales leaders within their organizations. So if you'd like to gain insight into how we're able to achieve that, and also some further information on our talent targeting system that we use for companies, just put the word talent in the chat box and I'll reach out to you after this session to give you some more information. Now, that said, today is not about me, funnily enough. Nor is it about recruitment. It's actually about you. And I'm specifically now talking to business leaders within the IT channel industry. Now, Alcon Maddox has already spoken with a number of you on the call today, just to get a better sense of what your top of mind challenges are as a result of COVID-19. And some of you have already become part of the mastermind community that has been created just really to tackle this crisis head on from a business perspective. Now, these top-of-mind challenges are really what's been driving the content of this webinar series. And this is really our way of not only giving back to the IT community, but then also in a way to bring us together so that we may support each other during this hard time, but then also set ourselves up to succeed rather than simply just survive during this period. Now, over the last 6 months, some of you will already know we've held a number of different sessions, topics including fast-tracking digital transformation, managing a partner ecosystem during a crisis, switching from CapEx to OpEx with cloud computing, and also how does a distributor remain relevant. Now, each week, obviously, we bring in different industry experts to help piece together strategies to overcome these very real challenges, and this week is really no different. At the end of this series, which will be hopefully the end of this month, we'll be compiling all of these strategies in the form of a white paper. So if you want a copy of that white paper, just stay to the end of today's session. I'll give you some information on how you can obtain a copy. So the focus of today's session will be how to conduct business without a handshake. And there's really no better person to guide us through this than Erik Leung. Now, before we do that, Erik, for the benefit of those who don't know you already, why don't you start by giving us a little bit of an insight into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. My name is Erik Leung. I'm the founder and COO of Simplifai, which is a company focusing on using AI technology to automate business processes. So I started this company 3 years ago after having worked extensively with AI technology and understand the potential of what we can take that technology to generate business value. And one of the most low-hanging fruit, the lowest hanging fruit that we actually see is that there's a lot of repetitive work being done every day in office settings that could be automated using the technology AI, and how that would free up the spare work capacities to where the workers can spend on working on something that is more value added for both the businesses, and the worker themselves will feel more satisfactory. So it has been a very nice journey so far. Since the start, now we have grown to be an international company of 70 plus employees, and we have a wide partnership network across the globe, plus a dominant market position in the Nordics.
Fantastic. even despite those good things, the reality is, I think the COVID-19 has obviously, well, not thrown us all off the rails, but it's certainly affected us all to different degrees, right? Now, before we get into the strategies that you and I discussed a couple of weeks ago and how we overcome such challenges, what I really want to understand from your perspective first is, you know, as a software vendor, what do you see as the key challenges in the market faced by companies like yourselves?
Yeah, actually, it's I might actually start by kind of reflecting upon how COVID-19 hits us. Of course, it all started on our personal life, then it's starting to reflect on the businesses. I remember when there was an outbreak just coming into Europe, I was still on my trip to Spain. And everyone was a bit scared because, you know, number one, I am Chinese, I look Chinese, and the outbreak did start from China. So I have to spend a lot of time explaining to them I'm actually not from China, I'm from Norway. And then I've tried sending masks to some of my extended relatives in China, and I realized that actually the DHL wouldn't go through because it's just considered a SARS item, and it makes it very difficult to allow people to just simply transport them to individuals. And that's when I started to realize this COVID-19 is actually not just like a swine flu that was just a period of time and it will go away. So then it's starting to be kind of serious. And then we get back to the office after the vacation, and then I realized that some of the businesses started to ordering their employees to stay home. The work capacity of the teams dramatically dropped from some of our customers. And then we realized that we're getting often these answers from our sales processes with our potential customers. Either they are their businesses dropped dramatically, so they got hit pretty bad economically. And then we have another group of customers which we thought, yeah, you don't really get hit economically because you're in the health sector. You should preferably have a lot of inquiries, or for travel insurance agencies that, you know, have a lot of people having to ask for refund. So you should actually have more inquiries, and it will make the business case even stronger. But no, they don't have time to talk to us because they're completely swamped by everything that came into the customer service team, or any of these repetitive work just becomes increased exponentially. So, and of course, we'll still have a business who got hit by both ends, who are actually having to staff up more to handle the inquiries, and their economy gets hit because of the COVID-19. So overnight, almost, that we realized that the way we conduct business have to change dramatically, because we're not getting anywhere. When we're trying to book a meeting, you know, let me come to the office. Like, no, nobody's in the office. You can't come to me. And then we have to, okay, no, something is different, and we have to react. So that was how we started to realize that COVID-19 is very, very serious. It's going to change the way we work and the way we live for a period in front.
And I think more and more companies have, you know, certainly from the interaction I've had with companies over the last few months, at the beginning of the period, there was, what I experienced was there was an attitude of, okay, let's wait and see, hopefully things will get better. But the reality is, whilst, yes, arguably things have got better as far as business is concerned, albeit moderately, the reality is the wait and see attitude has now shifted, because there's no such thing as, and I said it in the last session, that there will be no such thing as a post-COVID-19 world that people were originally waiting for. COVID-19 is here to stay. So we now understand a lot of the behaviors that we have to accommodate from a business perspective, be that reconfiguring our workplace or reconfiguring processes to engage with customers and partners. So it's really that I think is really the part that I really want to kind of dive into in a bit more detail with you today, because, you know, irrespective of changing market conditions, businesses still need to operate, right? We still need to make revenue. We still need to, you know, the plan is to still be here in 5 to 10 years. So business continuity is obviously key. Now, but during our last session, you actually walked me through 3 of the strategies that Simplifai are employing in order to navigate this period of ambiguity. You know, we discussed so the revision of market strategy, adjusting of sales processes, gaining trust without meeting face-to-face, of course, as well, being very important. So what I want to do today, Erik, is for you to just walk us through each of these one by one. But before we do that, just a reminder to to the people on the call today. Look, if you have any questions or insights along the way, guys, just write your questions in the chat box, and I'll quite happily read them out to Erik as we go. Similarly, like I said, if you have any insights, just type capital I and write the insight, and again, I'll read that out just to ensure that obviously the content that we're delivering here is obviously a value to you guys. So look, let's take the first one as we go, Erik. Revision of market strategy. What do you mean by this, and how is that applied to Simplifai?
Yeah, once we started to realize that things are no longer the same, we, like everyone else, have to tell our employees to stay home, and the sales processes basically across the board, they just stopped up. And the way that government is communicating most of the time is that they're giving us the facts. This is where we are now, but at the same time, they're also giving us the hope, saying that if we do this, if everyone is in this, hopefully this will be a period that will be over soon. So we have always gotten this 2 to 4 weeks forecast that for the next 2 to 4 weeks, it will be closed. People will be staying home, but then maybe we will be opening up within 4 weeks time and such. So this is the time when the businesses goes into let's wait and see modus. And I'm talking about around March, April. And of course, in April, we also have Easter. So then it becomes more like people are already in Easter modus earlier. So we don't really get through them. And so instead, we use the time of planning. Okay, if it opens up again in April, what do we do? If it doesn't, what do we do? And then we're starting to have multiple scenarios where we simulate how likely we are with getting the businesses that we were subdued to the closing before the COVID hits us, and then how likely they are we can revive it and then starting to close them. So we make different scenarios, we make the adjustments. Of course, we need to revise the forecast as a scale up. We have an investor we need to report to. We got to make sure that our numbers are accurate as it allows to be. So then we realized that one thing is that not every single country in this world got hit by COVID-19 at the same time. There's a process of things transferring from one place to another. And around that time, we were also lucky to be put into contact with a company called the York Group in the US, who are working with scale-ups like us. And they have an international network of partners that they would like to connect with us. For a company like us who is ISVs, in independent service providers, and with the Microsoft license service providers, and how we can together generate more value and generate more consumptions of the Microsoft Azure services. And after the workshop with them, we realized it was a really good fit. There's a huge market potential for our services across the globe. So they open up the network to us, and they start introducing us to their partner network. We will start by the countries that are actually not too heavily hit by that first, or the ones that are already past the first phase. So we started off with the company in UK called Bytes. Now we have a partnership agreement with. We spent basically the first month getting into contact, getting through the introduction. Since we are not in the same country, naturally it would have been normal that we would take the meeting on Teams anyway. And it really doesn't make a difference whether they're sitting at home or in the office. Then we were introduced to VAL, which is our highlight partners in the Middle East. They have actually been very positive to us all the way from the beginning. And then we also have ongoing dialogue with regions like Australia, New Zealand, Asia Pacific. And we also use the time to ramp up the sales capacity in our office in India, which we also already have a development center already. So we spent the time where everyone in Norway is wait and see into using the spare capacity that we have to ramp up our international strategies while there is the capacity. Because everyone has the spare time away from the operation, then it would make sense for us to, why don't we discuss something that is a little bit more long-term? And that happens to be the little gap hole that we managed to utilize during those 2 months. So, yes.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly interesting how, so what you're saying is the, the advent of COVID-19 and the recognition that, like you said, it wasn't affecting each country at the same time, nor was it affecting each country to the same degree. It almost, I guess, propelled your globalization strategy. because, as you say, because of what you do, the nature of your business and who can benefit from it. There are no borders, right? The only border is that perceived, and it's just because you haven't made or received introductions. And like you say, partnering someone with like the York Group sounds like almost a marriage made in heaven to some extent, because it really did open up the other markets for you, which is fantastic. Now you mentioned there's one thing that you said, obviously minimizing the risk by going global, perhaps earlier than you maybe would have anticipated in your your roadmap because of the current situation. You said upskilling. I think you said sales capability in India, but then also you said utilizing spare capacity. Can you just explain a little bit more about that? Where is the spare capacity? Who are the people that weren't not necessarily performing, but working, if I can use that word?
So the sales team naturally would have less sales meetings to go to. That's natural, and so we utilize that time to do the market analysis. Where do we want to go first?
Again, are these field sales operatives now, or
correct?
So,
yeah, those are the spare capacities usually. Our operations, because we're a product company, so our product development team, it still continues ongoing as it was before. So that didn't change that much. If there's one thing that has changed a little bit, is that makes it easier for us to actually recruit talents, because the talent pool has been a lot. The quality of the talent pool has actually increased quite a bit as well. We're one of the lucky ones that we have a solid economical foundation, that we don't have to do massive layoffs like some of the larger companies might have to. And all of a sudden we start realizing, for the same salary level, we could get people with a much higher quality. So with that as well, so we all of a sudden have a team of people that, instead of chasing after sales in the near term, we could actually sit down and start to plan. Okay, if we were going international, what do we need? And what do we need to succeed? Who will we have to approach, in which order, and such. In addition, and together with VOD and the Bytes and your group, all of these partners, they also have the spare capacity of time to actually sit down with us, to go through our product and service offering and derive the go-to-market strategy, for example. And in that sense, we would then, in a way we call it, hit the ground running, because that was the next point I would like to get to, is that towards May, June, and July, people started to realize that, okay, we can't just wait and see. It has been 2 months, it has been 3 months already. And so something has to happen eventually. And that's when the dialogue started to ramp up, started to open up again. But by that time, we emerged as a different company. We're going from a company who have a customer base, one customer base in Norway, and looking to expand into our neighbor country, Sweden, into a company that already has now an international sales channel, backed by Microsoft, the York Group, and the partner network. And for that, we have a completely different message to go out to the market. It's now we are somebody who is established, we're here to stay, and our solutions and products are useful in many different countries. And it adds to the trust a lot in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's it's actually quite an interesting thing to take on board. I think for a lot of the companies based here within the UAE or any country really, because again, a lot of the conversations I've had over the last few months have been, how can we, there's been this desire, if you like, for companies based within the UAE to hear from other companies based within the UAE as to how they're adopting to the current situation. And the reality is, although you guys are not based within the UAE, I think your principled approach is something we can all learn from, right? Because why should we just kind of draw in our vision because of the challenges we face, when the reality is, if we just push those challenges down a bit and try and get over them, we can see a lot further afield, which is exactly what you guys are doing now. And I think that's it's a fantastic example that you're setting, and I think it will be quite inspiring to a lot of companies that are listening in today, because it proves that there is opportunity to do business if we're looking in the right places. And sometimes looking in the right places means, first of all, obviously establishing the right partnerships and the right connections. So tell me, how did you go about forming those partnerships and getting those introductions, like with people like the York Group, for example? How did all this come about?
Yes, it's all business relationships. With the York Group, it started out with Microsoft. York Group has a really tight relationship with Microsoft, and the timing-wise, it hits really well with when Simplifai was also scaling up the collaboration with Microsoft, both in Norway and expanding to Europe. We are on their app source offering, as well as the Azure Marketplace. And we just, through some internal introductions, we got into contact with the York Group. And they have already a plan on how to roll on ISVs like us. And then we went through the program, they understanding what our product offering is. They help us refine the message, the pricing schemes, and the partnership model, and then take us to their partner network. So, and by then we have already done enough practice on how to conduct business in the COVID time. So we got really equipped and used to having Teams meeting. We're really efficient on how to have a short and concise message in each meeting, so that it can, in a way, make it work instead of actually we have to meet face to face all the time.
Yeah.
Through them, then we got into contact with their network, like as I mentioned, Bytes in the UK, Raw Technologies in Dubai, and they could be in Australia and such. So then we're starting to take what we have learned in Norway of conducting these meetings using Teams, Zooms, and then we would run the same way with the other companies, with the other partners. So it has been quite smooth and straightforward. We gotten the help that we need from your group to kind of drive the process forward, as well as we have been very short and concise on who we are, how we do things, and these are kind of the work that we have done in the initial quiet months that we have spent the time on sharpening the market message, etc.
Yeah. So actually, it's back to the point you mentioned earlier on about, it sounds like you almost repurposed the sales guys into different functions, or got them to think more strategically about, like, say, go-to-market, marketing strategy, this kind of stuff, which isn't typically their day job, let's say. But exploring, I guess, what your employees, the additional things that your employees bring to the table, I think is also something other companies can learn from, because I think it's very easy when we recruit someone. You know, when at the time we recruit someone, we're very interested in their background, what they've achieved in the past, what kind of value they can bring. So we get sold on all of this this great stuff. Then we put them into a position, we forget about all that stuff, and we just almost isolate them or put them in a pigeonhole and forget it. But I think what you've done is almost the reverse. You kind of, okay, we need to do things differently. Get everyone's CVs back out. Let's see what we're all capable of, and start to contribute in ways that we perhaps are not typically paid for. But I think that's again something that I think other companies can really learn and take inspiration from. We have a question from Shu Wang, which I'll just read out. He says, "Hi Erik, do you feel COVID-19 outbreak, it is more difficult to get contracts with new customers, or other ways around? Do you feel using webinar to build relationships and trust as opposed to face-to-face meetings?"
Yes, it is actually, no doubt, it is actually tougher to get a contract in the COVID-19 times. That's what the economy data shows, that the business activities have dropped a lot across the globe, more or less. We did some reflection on that internally. It's like, why is that? And that's when we come to the realization is that the fact that we used to be able to go to the customer, shake them in the hand, look them in the eye, and sit down together on both sides of the table and starting to talk, to be able to observe the way they react, the body language, all of that, they mean something. The process of evaluating should we proceed or not. There's more feelings behind a business decision of whether to purchase something, and there's always this trust element. Do I trust this vendor, this company, who is relatively young, that they're able to deliver what they promised that they would have? And that always becomes less so if you're on a camera. Like, for example, right now, you'll see me from the chest up, shoulder up. but you don't see how my hand gesture is, you don't see how my lower body would be, and that's one of the things that makes it very difficult to read from the salesman's perspective. Are the customer thinking about what are they thinking about? Do they buy into the story or do they not? You miss some of the body language reading from the sales meeting. So that means naturally the sales process will be slower. But on the other hand, if you're able to find the unique value proposition, the selling point, it's not just why should we acquire this solution? Why should we acquire this solution from Simplify? But also, why should we acquire this solution from Simplify now and not 6 months later? Because everyone is in the wait and see modus. But if you manage to get past that, then the contract is still signed. We have managed to get customers during the COVID-19 time period when it was a lockdown. We have actually successfully sold to several customers who we never shook the hands of. It's tough, but it's not impossible. But then we have to be extremely sharp with our message because we have to replace the handshake, we have to replace the body language, and everything else would have to be the way we speak, the way we present ourselves. And that's also the time where references, trust becomes ever more important.
Yeah.
So
I think you make a very good point just about the ability. It's almost to some extent a different skill set, being able to close business without being present with someone in the room. I mean, I've experienced this firsthand in the early part of my career. I was a stockbroker, and a stockbroker is essentially a glorified telesalesperson, right? You know, we're calling people we've never met, and we're getting people to send us money for investments based on a handful of conversations on the phone. And I think it goes the two things that I think are needed in order for the business relationship to start or for you to close deals, irrespective of what you're offering, is you need to be very obviously transparent in what you're doing, and the fact that you are obviously there to close the deal, yes, but to build a relationship for the future. But then also, I think from a buyer perspective, buyers I think need to be more willing to accommodate let's say an extra few minutes of conversation to really get to know someone, because this is the one thing that we can never get back, right? It's the time, and it's the time. So irrespective of whether you're meeting face to face or over a video conference, if you're both willing to invest the time in getting to know each other better and each other's value proposition, and if there is alignment there, I think it's both the buyer and the seller's responsibility to invest that time to see where the relationship goes. Now, obviously, you're not going to entertain every single person that calls you, but the reality is that's where, if you like, the new or enhanced skill set of a sales department comes in. It's how do you inspire that trust early on in the conversation, so that your potential new partner gives you the time to explain the value of it. You know, we're talking to new companies all the time, and I think the interesting thing for us is we don't cold call or hand people. That's not our business model. But the reality is we're very confident in what we do because we know we can add value. And because we know we can add value, that comes across in everything, every conversation we have. And I think that's maybe comes back to maybe internal training within companies as well. It's like there's a new level of understanding of our own products that we need in order to take it to the market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Another aspect of how COVID-19 changes the way we are also is it strips everything to the bare minimum. There will no longer be time for let's do something because it's cool, do something because it's nice to have. Everything will be back to we absolutely need it. If not, there is no time for that, because not only are they strapped on the cash because of the economic outlook is uncertain, but also because you will have less staff on hand to do everything there is to do. So only the key activities become the remaining. And for us, of course, we don't go into a customer without a business case, but then everyone else do. Everyone has a business case that they lay up in front and say, you know what, if you invest into this solution, you will get this much in gain over time. But how do you still get the attention among the tens of business case in front of the potential buyer, the customer? It's then it becomes the next aspect, what you were touching upon, the trust. Now, we have a really good value proposition. We tell everyone, it's we can remove 90% of your repetitive work if we can deliver it within a month, and you have your investment paid back within 6 months. It almost sounds too good to be true in many settings, but we are able to deliver. But however, because it is so advanced and the business case is so strong, then it is starting to become this, is it possible? And then people are starting to have, then we're starting to have references. We need to have trust. And to gain the trust without the handshake, being a young company like we are, it is of course naturally it's challenging. So Microsoft, your group, all these customers that we have had, they become very good ambassadors for us. The fact that we have gone through a very rigorous track to get our solutions on the Azure Marketplace, app stores, and the fact that we have 0 customer who resigned from our product ever since the production setting, all of these count for something. If you're ever in doubt, here's the number to our reference customer, feel free to call them. We have already got enough satisfied customers who are willing to speak for us, advocate for us. And that helps to knock down the initial worries or lack of trust issues. So, but trust is very important, because without that, you will be competing on a lack of foundation, and that becomes a very difficult fight from day one.
Definitely. So I think the point you mentioned about essentially, I guess, borrowing trust from partners is absolutely key, especially when breaking into new markets as well. When you've got someone, for example, like for argument's sake, like VAD Technologies representing you in this region. The reality is, I'm sure there are companies that are will entertain Simplifai as a solution based on VAD Technologies reputation, not yours, if that makes sense. And that's the kind of leverage, I guess, you use when you're accessing new markets, and that's, I guess, the benefit of having such relationships, because they've obviously gone through, or they put you through your processes in order to qualify as a vendor for them, in much the same way as you've done the same for them. Can they add value to our network? Can they introduce us to new clients, new market, new partners? But it all comes back to relationships, right? It's relationships, but then it's also, how can you prove? I was sitting with a client yesterday, and I was sitting with the pre-sales guys, and they were explaining to me the question that often doesn't get asked in a sales meeting. The pre-sales guys get called after the meeting for almost a back channel conversation. The question is usually asked from one technician to another. Can you deliver? Is it possible?
Yes.
Because sometimes the sales guys will obviously not embellish the truth, but certainly they're selling the product, right? But a tech guy talking to a tech guy, there's this respect level. I just thought it was a really interesting dynamic that this back channel conversation has, and often it's that conversation that will influence whether or not the deal gets signed.
Yeah, technology is usually at least in the field of AI, sometimes it might become the make or break. And I guess this is where I also, my technological background also comes in very handy. And also we have people in our team that also has a tech background, so that they naturally can go a little bit deeper into the discussion, and they would not be perceived as just a sales guy who will say anything to get something sold. Instead, who can actually hang with the customer on another level, on going a little bit deep down into, okay, how exactly can you justify that you can actually automate 90% of the workload? Well, yeah, because the stuff is repetitive. We handle the repetitive case. We focused on the 90-10 rule, and there will be 10% of the exceptions that we would just leave it for the colleagues to handle. And then it's starting to make sense, and then you match that up with reference cases, you match that up with other partners who are also advocating for you. Then it's starting to add together to a complete picture. Okay, these guys are for real. They're not just talking about something that is fluffy, but they actually can deliver, and they have delivered. And that makes a big difference in the crucial moments to get down to, can we trust these guys or not? But of course, then afterward, we still need to discuss the process, the pricing, and references, etc.
Yeah. We have another question, again from Xu Wang, so I'll just read it out again. So, Erik, do you think COVID-19 has brought more threats or more opportunities to Simplifai in terms of sales?
Well, it's kind of interesting. In also the person who asked the question is also Chinese. In Chinese, the word crisis is actually written in two words. It's danger and opportunity, which is kind of how the Chinese view any crisis, is that you will always look for the opportunity when there is danger. Was it also the quote from Winston Churchill, never waste a good crisis, because there's always, it's in a way, it's a shuffling of the deck. Some people will come out as winner, some people will come out as losers. So you have company like, or in Norway, we have a company like Pexit that their need, the demand dramatically shot up because of this. And in Norway, we also have another company called Order, and they basically do this QR code ordering food and payment on the app for any restaurants, because you no longer can have a waitress walk around and taking orders anymore. And then these services that emerges because of the crisis, they are the one who actually assess the situation really well and understand what it needs in order to offer the service that matches with the current situation. And Simplifai, to a high extent, we're doing exactly the same thing. We understand that you're not going to have a full staff customer service team, and even if you do, inquiries usually doubles, triples, if not more, for some individual industries. So we target these customers. We would get enough reference case, get enough trust, and then we would target the message to these customers. Now, if we can do that without you having to commit resources, get a proof of concept, get a test trial with us. Once you use it, you understand it works, it makes it very difficult for them to turn off the systems afterward. And then we started to put the foot in the door, and then we started to get scale up the business from there. So, and then we target countries where they're usually heavily on manual labor. And then from there on, we will having this value proposition, because manual labor makes it even more scarce in a time like this. So therefore, we usually have a little bit easier way in at the beginning, at the very least. Yes.
So, a question for you. So, forward thinking perhaps, but again, based on conversations I've had with companies over the last 5 months, where success has changed from, obviously everyone works through a budget, they have a forecast for the year, but some companies have now thrown the budget out the window because things have obviously been so uncertain and ambiguous, let's say. So some companies, their goal for 2020 would be to stabilize their organization. For some, it would be to maintain their existing headcount. What does success look like for Simplifai in 2020?
For us, would be to maintain the growth rate as much as possible. Now, everyone said, actually, we went through. Yes, sorry?
I like that. You started off with maintain, implying that we're going to be keep it steady, but you said maintain the growth rate, which I like.
Yeah, about the growth, because that's basically the life of the projectile of the company at the early stage. So once we get to a certain size, then we can talking about maintain. But right now it's the growth that matters. Now, we did land a round of funding that we planned for in February. That was, when the European stock market more or less just crashed across the board. And we were actually, after some research, we realized that we're one of the few companies in the market that all manages to do that, to raise, not only to raise fund, but to raise the fund that of the amount that we expected, that we needed to have and expected to have. So that gives us the trust, that gives us the guts to kind of charge forward. It's like, if we can manage this, the most difficult task, and that is to raise money during the stock market crash, then just say when it comes to growth and everything, it should be something that we should manage. So the only difference is where do they come from? I mean, we postponed the plan of going to Sweden, but instead we wrapped up everywhere globally. So if things turns out the way it is, we're still expecting to have the year like we had planned for at the beginning. But we have to do some more tweaks to readjust our strategy. But that we have to do as the world has changed. That's the way we see it.
So what is next for you guys then? You know, how do you see your solution or product offering? Well, let's stick with what you have at the moment, right? How do you see that offering or generating value for businesses that have been affected by COVID-19?
Yes, I think there are already people saying that there is no such thing as a post-COVID-19. We might have to learn to live with these kind of diseases with us for a while going forward. Or even if the COVID-19 has phased out because of vaccine, we might still have something else coming up in a few years. So what we need to do is that we realizing that your supposedly most stable of assets, human resources, might be fluctuating over time of availability. So using a digital employee offering from Simplifai to bridge the gap, the productivity, would have been like having machines in the factories. And it is the trend that has started because of probably COVID-19 or even before, but it's going to be here to stay. It's going to be more ubiquitous than in the future. So I can say any businesses who are serious into maintaining the service level or looking to grow should have a digital employee in their departments, working side by side with their employee to bridge the gap when there is growth in traffic or when there is a less availability of the resources for whatever reason. And having that working in every single company in most of the departments, this is where we see Simplifai will be driving the trend as one of the market leader in this area.
Mm-hmm. So then, how does this, if you again think perhaps further into the future, how much more? Your solution today is very obvious. I can definitely see the market fit. But how much more can technology move forward in that respect? How do you see, or where do you see Simplifai specifically in the next 3 to 5 years, given the transformation that you've undergone already and that you'll likely have to undergo in the next few years?
I think what we are working with right now is called AI, artificial intelligence. I know there will be some year left before we can call it artificial general intelligence, where it's starting to have some common sense of its own and be able to do more tasks than itself. But what I see going forward is that within a few years, instead of having a digital employee working in every single department, we might each of us have our own personal assistant in the form of a digital employee working just for me. So imagine for you, Richard, you could have maybe have an assistant digitally going to your mailbox, booking the meetings for you and answering some of the basic inquiries based on what you have taught it. And that would increase the productivity of each and every single one of us by multiplication. Say if I all of a sudden got sick, I have to be in a hospital, I still have maintain a certain level of productivity through my digital assistant, for example. And that's kind of the future I see, and that's what it is worth striving for.
Definitely. And then, so your globalization strategy is pretty clear at the moment, given what's happening. Is there any particular? Obviously, we're very aware of what you're doing here in the Middle East, but are there any other countries or regions that you've that are on the short-term radar for you guys?
Right now, we are just about to close down our partnership agreements in the Australia, New Zealand region. Our next step will be Asian Pacific, because as I mentioned, they're also a region with a lot of human labor, and which also are pretty hardly hit by COVID-19. Then, of course, it's everyone's dream to be able to get a foothold in the US, which is the absolute toughest market for any IT vendors who are looking to establish there. But also there's before that we have a whole Europe one by one, then that we also need to look into. We can conquer it. The challenge is, of course, you have a huge market only speaking one language, and then you have in Europe similar market size speaking about 15 to 20 different languages. So there will be, of course, more challenging. But it's also geographically it's closer to us, so we should not overlook it.
Yeah, excellent. No, I think it's really interesting, some of the points you mentioned today, guys. Look, if there are any other questions or insights, please pop them in the chat box now, and I'll happily read them out to Erik. But just to kind of recap on the themes or the strategies, if you like, that we've been discussing today, Erik. So obviously the challenges because of the pandemic, we're having to accommodate a new way of doing business without the handshake, as you quite rightly said. So the revision of the market strategy has obviously been quite key for you guys, and I think for software vendors across the globe. But that revision of strategy has, as you said, propelled your globalization strategy, because there's a realization that, why wait? I think the reality is you'd always plan to go global, like most IT companies, but the reality is, given the current situation, it created almost a perfect storm to some extent to propel you into different territories, but then also, being introduced to people like the York Group, solidifying the relationships that you have with the likes of Microsoft, has obviously helped move that forward as well. The second thing we touched on was, or the second strategy rather, was the adjusting of the sales process. So, accommodating new ways of doing meetings, Teams or Zoom, and you've already said that you've managed to close quite a few deals without even meeting companies already, right?
That's correct. It was actually quite magical in the sense that, okay, so we had a couple of meetings on Teams to explain, of course, who we are, product offering, we answer the questions, we write the offer, and then they go through the verification process, and they did the reference check, and then it became a signature. It's we have to be very efficient. We have to be very sharp on the message. But at the end of the day, it is possible completely.
Would you say there was one thing, obviously the different way of having a meeting, I'd say, rather than face-to-face, you're doing this via video conference. But would you say there is one kind of key takeaway in the way that you've realigned your sales process that makes the video conference work for you guys? Like, do you understand the question? Did I make that clear?
Yeah. Well, the attention will be fully on the camera. So that is really important that the body languages, there has to be assuming that it doesn't going to be recognized or being seen. Probably you need to also ask a little bit more questions just to make sure things are clear, because you don't get to read as much out of the context or the language as you would like. Of course, the meetings cannot be too long. Of course, in a regular office, you can take a coffee break, go out 5 minutes, come back. In the Teams meeting, we cannot have meetings longer than 1 hour usually. Anything more than 1 hour, you will notice easily the other party will loses their attention span, for example. So that's another thing that is worth looking into. I used to like to read a lot into the handshake. There are different ways of doing a handshake. It also says the personality will be different. I lost all of that. Of course, now all I got is the words that comes from both party, and to judge basically the likelihood of the sales. What are the main concerns of the customers? What are they evaluating when they're evaluating a vendor, etc. All of these things, all I have is facts on the table. It might actually put a new perspective of how we're analyzing the qualified leads in the future. But certainly this period has taught us a lot about how to conduct sales in a completely different settings than before.
Yeah. Is there anything that that you've learned, let's say, not to do? Because obviously, like you say, we're talking about the success of some of the deals that have been signed during this period where you've had to accommodate video conferencing. But have there been deals where you haven't signed? And if you look back and reflect on why they've not been signed, would you put it down to a process that was still being ironed out? Or would you put it down to, because not everyone's obviously going to buy our solution, but do you think that now it seems that you've, like I said, ironed out the kinks in your process? Do you think there will be customers that you can come back to now that you're a little bit more polished with that kind of delivery?
Absolutely. If there's one thing that to really put a finger on and really do the analysis, we haven't lost too many deals that became a no, but we have quite a few of the deals especially early stage, where the customer says, this is very interesting, but I don't have time to look at this right now. Please come back in a few months. A few months become quickly a few months more, and then it just becomes what we call it are the zombie cases. The thing is, once we go through the analysis, we realize that there is one very important element that we couldn't address good enough in order to make sure the deal goes through at the beginning, and that is, why should they go for us now? I mean, if we're preaching that you will gain the productivity, you'll gain the quality, and all of those things, they exist. If you buy from me today, you will have it. If you buy from me 6 months later, you still have it. And if right now you're swamped or you have other projects that precedes you in priority, then you will naturally fall down in the pecking order. So that's really important that we need to address. You know, there is a difference if you acquire our solution now versus 6 months later. Usually there will be another type of value that it adds. For example, companies who are already breaching the SLA on the inquiries, on answering the inquiries because of the increased traffic due to COVID-19, or that each of the mistakes are very costly, you know, and the cost far outweighs the cost of the solution. And if you don't resolve that now, you have to keep paying the cost of the errors until you acquire from us. And that might be a cost they're not willing to live with. And then I think it's a really alternative aspect.
The important point you make, it's the idea of, like I say, your solution clearly solves a problem that the majority of businesses have, but the reality is if that problem is not top of mind, they're not going to want to solve it today, right? I mean, I run a class here in the UAE for the Dubai Chamber, helping startups commercialize their operation. And one of the sessions we hold is how to elevate the status of your problem, because a lot of startups, they obviously create a company, they've adopted the problem solution mindset, and they get frustrated when they don't get any traction. But it's because, yes, they solve a problem, but they haven't solved the right problem in the eyes of the buyer, right?
It's even more difficult, right? Yeah, absolutely. So it is. It's important to address the why now. That's always the question that we ask ourselves in the sales team before we go into the meeting. It's like, yes, we understand that we have something to offer for all of our customers, but why should they buy from us now? If we couldn't answer that question going in, we usually won't have much of a high success rate of landing the deal. Usually the cases that we manage to get, we have the why now question answered. So it's very important to think about that, because now we're done with all the innovative, coolness, nice to have. Everything got stripped down to the bare necessity. So we need to make our solution the bare necessity that any company will need.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. Okay, and then the final thing was the final strategy, that is gaining trust without the face-to-face meeting. So borrowing trust from partnerships, as you said, like be they the York Group, be they Microsoft, or be they distributors in different territories. And is that the approach now? Obviously, you have a distributor here within the MEA region. Do you have, or are you in the process of setting up distributor agreements within other territories as well?
Yes, it does make a difference. At the beginning, our PowerPoint don't even have logos on our partnerships or customer list. We believe that the best technology always wins. That was, of course, a bit naive of us thinking so back in the days, but now it makes a big difference. You know, seeing, oh, you are with God Technologies, oh, you're doing business with Microsoft, or you're a preferred solution of Microsoft. It immediately removes the mental barrier of this is just a new company coming and is unproven. You know, that completely just falls out of the window. The moment they see the logos on the PowerPoint, knowing that who we have as customers, it counts for something. So this borrowing trust is one. And we have also gone into meetings with Microsoft, where Microsoft would then be offering their perspective as a trusted advisor, saying that, okay, if you set up your solutions this way, to combining your Microsoft products and Simplifai products, you will have a much holistic solutions. You know, if it comes from a Microsoft solution architect saying that, it carries a different weight than us with our sales team, for example.
Yeah, quite right. It's that impartial third party that, just going back to the conversation I had yesterday with the pre-sales guy. You know, his advice gets validated by people who call the Microsoft vendor desk, for example. And if he were to lie or embellish the truth in any way, then the company would be taken off the list, and it would severely impact them. So having that, being able to, like you say, being transparent and truthful is clearly what has to be done. But having someone to back you up or confirm that yes, what Erik says is correct is massive. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Look, Erik, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I've thoroughly enjoyed the session. I think there's plenty of takeaways for those that are participating, those that will watch the session going forward. So thank you very much for your time. For those on the call, guys, look, as I mentioned earlier on, if you'd like to receive a copy of the white paper, just put the term white paper in the chat box, and I'll ensure that one of my team contacts you in the next couple of days to arrange to get that to you, hopefully by the end of September. And also, if you'd like to arrange an informal chat about becoming part of the mastermind community, again, just put the word mastermind in the chat box, and I'll reach out to you personally to take the conversation forward. So that's it for today. Erik, thank you once again. I believe you might be in one next week, so hopefully we'll get the chance to meet up for a coffee then.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Erik. Take care. Have a good week, guys. Bye-bye.